Welcome back, everybody. I'm really excited to be talking to the person that's actually said yes, he'll come on and talk to us. This is Nick Brown, author of Real World Agility. It's a book that I was listening to this morning and absolutely loved it. Welcome, Nick. It's really nice to meet you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Andy. Good to see you, Andy. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Cool. Tell us a bit more about you, because for those out there who don't know you, tell us a bit more.
Sure thing. So I've been in the Agile world for about 12 years now. I started as a kind of delivery manager, scrum master type role at Royal Mail, working with teams that were doing a lot of stuff for e-commerce journeys, like track your item, find a price, that kind of thing. After a few years there, I moved to PwC and I worked internally with a data team, helping them adopt varying degrees of agility in their way of working. And the role then worked with kind of other teams in technology, and then became more of a coach, and then started looking at things like our technology organization, building a coaching team as well. So I was there about 5.5 years. Then I went to Nationwide Building Society. I was there for about 16 months. And then ASOS, where I was at for just shy of 3 years, where I was kind of lead coach there, a small team of coaches, but had about 100 teams at ASOS. So kind of steering the ship around what good looks like from an agility perspective there. And now I'm a consultant. So I work for an organization called Thrive Partners, and we help our organizations build the best digital products in the most effective way possible.
Oh, that's a nice tagline right at the end there.
And I love the strapline as well. What really struck me around your book was the real world examples. And this is what, obviously you've said it's real world agility and real world examples. And I'm really curious because Andy and I have probably got similar backgrounds to you. There's some stories that I probably just wouldn't want to share. Did you find yourself in that going, do you know what? I can't share that, or, I'm going to have to kind of finesse this slightly?
Yeah, there were definitely somewhere. There's one example where I don't mention the organization, where it doesn't paint a particularly positive light. But that's not really due to the fault of the organization as such, more the thing that they were doing. There's definitely some stuff that I was like, there's no way I can include that. Not just in terms of it being a shortcoming of that organization from an agility perspective, but also maybe my own way I went about things. As a practitioner, I think you go through this journey where you're very passionate about it, but you can channel that passion in the wrong way. So in the book, like I mentioned, the example around the forecasting delivery, and how I was always getting that wrong. And like early on in my career, I used to be like, and Andy went like this, given the topic of his book, like obsessed about things like story points. And I used to be like 1 week into the sprint saying, why haven't we done our points yet? And I was like, I could include that in the book, but I was like, no, I don't really think I should. So I thought I'd save it and reveal it on a podcast instead. So yeah, there were definitely somewhere I was like, I'd love to include that, but it probably just isn't the right thing to do.
Yeah, and what I like the way about the book is you've got that real world examples, and actually it's the way it's structured as well, because you set out the theory, and you explain why it's so important, and then follow up with a real world example of this really helped the teams, or this when we're doing health checks, and it was this and it was that, and it just, there's some really good books out there that obviously do the theory, but then it just misses that. Oh, and this is how it was applied.
I think there's something in the way you articulate what you've just kind of said is it's almost to the point of this is what I tried and this is what I screwed up. And that was one of the biggest things I took away from your book, it was just really nice to see that kind of that openness and honesty, helping people understand why it's not a good practice to do something, rather than just saying this isn't a good practice, right? You're kind of actually almost demonstrating that kind of level of why, such and such wasn't healthy, wasn't good. What, being obsessed with story points, why that wasn't a good practice for you. I guess, to put this into a question, why is that so important for you to articulate? When in a book like this, why is that level of kind of openness really important for you?
I think it's because, I'm not a massive reader of Agile literature, but the stuff that I have read, it's been inspiring, but when I've either come to apply it myself, I've fallen short, or I've not quite got it, or the organization hasn't quite got it. And I think there's a lot of books out there, and they don't talk through kind of all the stuff that they did before to get to that point. It's like, oh, here's this amazing model, but there's no like, here are all the 5 things I did before this, and they all failed, and this is why they failed. And I think as well, I like to think it shows growth as a practitioner. Because if you can look back at certain points and not just say, well, I tried this and it didn't work. It's like, oh, I tried flow metrics in this organization, they weren't up for it. So it was the organization's fault. To get better, you need to dive into a bit as to, well, why do you think that didn't work? And it's not all on the organization. It's got to be a part that you've played in that. I just think with the way the industry is at the minute as well, where it's kind of, so many things presented on social media as silver bullets, or, people painting a very positive perspective of what it's like to be a coach or a practitioner, but without all the hard stuff that comes with it. I just wanted it to be a bit different than anything certainly I've ever read. Maybe there are books out there where people have documented this kind of thing as well, but I like to think of it as, well, if I could help someone prevent making those mistakes that I made earlier and ultimately save them maybe years off their growth, then I think that's the kind of thing that's worth putting out there, rather than just, I could easily have just done, here's my framework and there you go, and it's perfect. And these are all the places where it worked, and omitted all the things that I got wrong. And I just think then as a book, it would just be like every other Agile book you read. It needed to be, for me, something that stood out as to, oh, this is a bit different. This is this guy saying, oh, here's all the mistakes I made, or the mistakes I observe. So I like to think it maybe stands out in the bookshelf a little bit with that lens on it.
It certainly does. I mean, I love the fact actually that you, from that experience also, you call out that retros, there's lots of people out there selling ideas of retros and using Miro and Mural to help it. And it's like, you actually call it out, retros are there to improve the process. The fun is useful, but it doesn't actually have to be the whole thing that you're doing it. And there was the line, I think, you spent 25 minutes trying to work out how long, the Game of Thrones character. And I was like, yes, I've sat through so many like that. It was just so nice that somebody's actually calling that out and going back to the core. So well done.
Yeah, I think some people might be a bit upset by it if they read it, but
yeah, but we're all here about delivering value. So I just thought, I love that, love it. Was there anything whilst writing the book that surprised you, that you actually the route that you went down, or was there anything you thought, actually, I didn't realize I was going to talk about this by the time I started writing it?
There were definitely more examples that, both good and bad, that I'd experienced that I hadn't really thought about till it came to writing. And that's one of the reasons why I think writing's so powerful as a practitioner. And it doesn't need to be, writing a book as such. It can be as simple as, doing things like week notes, where you just summarize your week and the learning that comes from that. So there were definitely instances where I thought I was going to be struggling for content. And then it was only through kind of just a bit of reflection, like, oh, actually, I do have this example, and I do have this where this went wrong. So, like the one about the internal product, and I was like, oh, how do I come up with something that caters to that audience? And then I was like, actually, I lived this experience, and I think I wouldn't have had that example at that point in time in my career, because I was still in the kind of rose-tinted, this is an amazing product. Yeah. And it's only in the years since where I've grown and I've reflected on it, actually, it wasn't as good as I thought it was. And it's kind of typical product manager's bias there, isn't it? It's my product's the best product out there and it solves everyone's problem. So yeah, it was only when I brought it all together that I started to realize, oh, I've got another example. And then I started to think about, well, what questions... So I focus very much on flow value, culture, delivery. But then I started thinking about things like predictability and quality, because invariably those are things that matter to people as well. And it was like, oh, actually, yes, I have examples of that. I have examples of that. And the predictability one as well, in particular, that was a very recent experience where someone that I interacted with was saying how much they'd improve predictability. And I was like, I'm not so sure. So that kind of inspired that side of things. So yeah, there were definitely one examples where I was like, oh, I'd actually completely forgotten about this. And actually, there's a really nice story to tell, even if it's a bad story, because at the end of the day, it shows hopefully that there's growth and learning there.
I think what I enjoyed about the book was the way that, and you just hit upon it there, like you focus on flow, delivery, culture. And I was just talking to Andy before we joined. And it was really nice to see culture was at the heart, not the heart of the book, but in the middle, because often books put that towards the end and, or it's almost an afterthought and stuff, but it's very much in the center. And I was like, yes, I love that. So was that on purpose, or was that an accident, or was that just the way that you work?
I toyed for a long time the order of those in terms of how they appeared. So flow, value, culture, delivery. And there were people that read advanced copies of it and they said, well, actually, you should put value first because that's the biggest issue in my organization. And I was like, yeah, but kind of like it's my experience. So I think it was... it was when it was at Nationwide, actually, we started talking about some of these ideas. And I think flow, we didn't really talk about delivery as such, but we focused a lot on flow, value, culture. And I think it just rolled off the tongue nicer. But yeah, certainly culture, it was so important to include it because in the example of kind of doing it at scale at ASOS, myself and one of the other coaches I worked with, Dan, we'd seen examples of where the culture side had been neglected and the team had got really good at all the other aspects, but then people were wanting to leave the team and hated working the team. And I was like, okay, this has to be the kind of in the main bit of this book. I can't just leave this till the end or like another thing you might want to consider. So you're seeing kind of, when I talk about the learnings with that, I talk about one of the things being culture trumps all. And I hope that's something that people take away from it, is that you can have fast flowing agile teams delivering value, but if people hate working there, it's probably not going to be very sustainable as an organization. You're going to have high turnover. People are going to talk badly about working that place. So it's something that a few years ago, I don't think I would probably have downplayed the significance. Whereas now I'm kind of much more, particularly with the way the world has gone now, and things like remote working and the part of that place. But yeah, it was a conscious effort to make sure it wasn't like right at the end of the book. It needed to be somewhere closer to the middle, so people don't forget about it, because it is incredibly important.
It's kind of interesting on the business psychology point of view, because it's one of the things I'm wrestling with is having watched organizations deal with culture around Agile and struggle to tackle it properly, because there's a gap between whose responsibility is it to go and solve those challenges. And Agile doesn't have anything in its DNA it's an implied byline that culture just will emerge because we're all coming together to do some good stuff. It's like, oh yeah, okay, how does that work? But I'm interested to hear your thoughts in when you face these kind of like culture issues within organizations, who's tackling them, right? And who should be, and where should that stuff really lie?
For me, it's always the leaders in a particular part of the organization. It starts from there, really. So it's either practicing what you preach. So okay, this agile stuff, it's predominantly a team-based thing, but what are you doing different in the leadership team, or as a leader yourself? And it's role modeling some of those things as well. So in the book, I talk about the example of the kind of leadership health check. So that's taking a kind of team-based concept, but applying the same thing. And, it can be just very small nudges that leaders need to make. It can be starting a meeting, talking about what some of your fears might be for a particular meeting, going AWOL almost. that type of thing starts to build psychological safety, because then people understand that actually you're coming to this as a leader and you're not thinking it's going to go perfect. It might go wrong, and we're aligned as to how it might go wrong so we can steer it back on track. That is a very, very small behavioral change you need to make. It's literally like 1 minute at the start of a meeting. And if you do that at every meeting, it can, cause kind of a ripple effect as to other people can then start adopting it, or other leaders might see it and start doing it in their area. I think it has to start with the leaders, because largely with the teams, there's only so much they can do. They can be a fast-flowing team but still get pushed work from a portfolio. Then you're not limiting with at the portfolio level, so that's where you need to change. And so I think you can get really good at the team stuff, but if your leaders aren't promoting or exhibiting the type of environment you need, then you're going to quickly get to a suboptimal kind of setup where it might work for some teams, but ultimately for the organization, it's not going to. So it'd always be to start with the leaders if kind of you're not seeing the culture there that there needs to be.
Yeah, it's always interesting where you have these the sayings like demonstrate the behavior you wish to see, and they're great, but they get forgotten weirdly. And then when when people do start doing demonstrating the behavior they wish to see, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, this works actually. Why don't we do this? It's a bit weird like that. Yeah, it's but I 100% agree with you. It's, the kind of the whole leadership within Agile again is another kind of term that's been kind of battered about, right, and thrown around. We'll just fix the leadership, right? Everything will be good. All our problems will be solved, and all this kind of stuff. We know it is difficult to do. It's hard. It's steering big ships. Is a very difficult job. So I'm curious. For the book, who's the audience for this? Who are you hoping to read this and get the most out of it?
So there's two main audiences, I think, for me anyway. People that are practitioners that are in coaching, Scrum Master, Product Manager, Product Owner type roles, that are working in teams or in a team, and they're wanting to evidence or showcase their impact or validate that they're working more effectively. For me, I like to think of it as, okay, there's a blueprint there as to we're going to do something differently as a team. How do we know if it's actually gotten better? And there's different ways you can look at that, different lenses around flow, value, culture, and delivery. And, you can pick one or many of those things and start looking at it. The other audience for me is the people, and it may be leaders, it may not be, the people that are effectively kind of like sponsoring these ventures around agility in the organization. Because I think for a long time they've been struggling as to, well, how do we know this is better or worse than before? And I like to show, particularly in the case study around ASOS at the end, as to here's a way you can do this in terms of validating it at scale. But, and this is the point that I stress throughout the book and certainly up front in the principles, you're not mandating a single framework. And I think a lot of leaders kind of feel like that's the part they have to play, is to, okay, we need to decide what direction we're going, be it Scrum, Kanban, Safe, Less, whatever. And then that's how we're going to know. We need to make that decision ultimately. It's like, but there's an example there shows that you don't have to, and you can still get good outcomes. And this is how you can measure those outcomes are being achieved. And it's not that you copy paste these things, because absolutely not, but it'd be, okay, what might flow look like in your organization? So in that case study, he talks about kind of like cycle time being at a certain value, so less than or equal to 28 days. That'll probably be very much a stretch for a lot of organizations. So tweak it. But at least there's something you can start with. So those are kind of the two groups, really. It's kind of like if you're a practitioner or in a team and you want to know if you're getting better, then look at that. And if you're a leader or sponsor or someone that's outside the teams and want to know if this Agile thing actually works, here's how you can go about checking if it is working. And you can do this in a way which doesn't mean you're telling everyone how this should work.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something that, I was thinking as I got towards the end, it was like those bits of how do we know this is working? And that was like one of the takeaways from me. And I hadn't seen it before. So I'm definitely be using some of those techniques that you provided for, future engagements and things like that. But my last question, I want to just say thank you for a couple of things. Thank you for putting number wang into a book. So it's brilliant. I've never, as soon as I saw it, heard it, I went, oh, wow, yeah, cool. That's number one. So thank you for that. But also thank you for, talking about something that actually gets missed over a lot is looking, because we say when we're delivering training, hey, look at the cycle time scatter plot. That'll tell you a story of what's going on. But you've actually gone a little bit further saying, look at the shapes that are making on the scatter time scatter plot. And just thinking like from the triangle point of view, what's the conversation? I thought, do you know what? That is a really powerful insight for anyone getting used to or getting into this to go, what patterns am I seeing? And it's something that I'm going to be taking away as well. And, I'm going to reiterate that. Look at the pattern, look what's going, look at the triangles. Yes, we look at the outliers and that kind of stuff, but just look at what's going on. So thank you for that as well. But my last question is one takeaway that what's the one takeaway you hope that somebody's going to get from reading the book?
What would be the one takeaway? I guess it would be just one. That's a hard one. It's like prioritizing a backlog, isn't it?
Naming your favorite child.
I love one, so that's an easy one. I think it would be to focus on the outcomes that agility brings. So don't obsess over terminology, job titles, frameworks, even what tool you use. Focus on the outcomes that should come from applying agility in the real world. And if you know what those outcomes are, then all the rest, people will find their way. So always start with what are the outcomes you want from an agility perspective. Because whilst it's oriented around these themes of flow, value, culture, delivery, ultimately the measures of success, they're outcome oriented. So work is flowing faster, we're delivering more value, or our purpose is improved, or we're working more effectively as a team, or we're considering probabilistic thinking when it comes to delivery. I think that would be my main one, and the second one being use data to validate those outcomes. Because I like to think in the book there's clear examples as to all those things, how you can check if you're on the right path or not.
Genuinely, from me, Nick, it's been lovely meeting you in person, because I owe you some amazing reviews, and you were the first person to read my book or review my book. And I really appreciate that. And and I'm really, really glad we've got you on this conversation. And it's just such a joy to see other people create books around flow and delivery and put it into practical understanding terms. I think that is just bloody marvelous. So it's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great to be here. Thanks for having me.